Hey, everybody. We're having people trickle in. We're going to get started in just a minute. As you come in, you'll see a little poll launch. So if you don't mind filling that out, that'd be great. And as I said, we're just going to wait a minute or so and then we'll get started tonight.
Alrighty, Tal, it looks like it's slowing down. Should we do this?
Yeah, let's go.
Perfect. Yeah, if you do get a second just to fill out the poll, that would be great, just so we know kind of who's in front of us. But thanks everybody for joining tonight. All right, Tal, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, let's do it. So um, today we're here to talk about executive functions. I'm going to give the first half of the presentation. My name is Tal Kitron. I'm with Appleworth Tutoring, which is part of our kind of family of brands under Guidewell. And I'm going to be coming to you from the perspective of an EF coach. So I work with students anywhere from middle school to high school to college age. I also do a lot of test prep, so SAT, ACT, LSAT. And then Drew.
Yep, I'm with one of our other sister brands. I'm with Summit Educational Group, similar to Tall. I also work with students on test prep and executive functioning. So just give us an opportunity to kind of share our perspective when we're working with students in terms of kind of what we see and sort of general advice or guidelines or practices that we have with our students. So hopefully you'll get some good takeaways as you learn more about this topic and also think about ways in which you can support your own students. But thanks again, everybody, for joining. And also, just real quickly, Tom might cover this, but we are recording this. We're going to cover a lot of ground in a relatively short amount of time. So please don't feel like you have to hang on our every word this evening. Obviously, we'll feel flattered if you do. But you'll get the link to the recording tomorrow or possibly Thursday at the latest. So that way, if you want to rewatch or re-listen to any of this, you'll get the opportunity to do so. Also, if you have friends or colleagues who you think might be interested in the topic, definitely feel free to share the link with them. And then if you have questions, please don't hold back. Tal and I keep an eye on the time, keep us moving tonight, but we definitely want to have time for questions at the end. Just in the interest of time, we will circle back and take questions at the end. But I'm monitoring the Q&A box. So on your screen, one of the tabs should be the Q&A tab. So if you have questions, again, please don't hold back. Feel free to type those questions in that Q&A tab, and then Tal and I at the end will circle back and answer any questions that you have.
All right, I'll take it from here. Thanks so much for that, Drew.
Oh,
So
of course.
we're talking today about understanding executive function, and that starts with just, well, what is it? And so executive functioning is, you'll see it on the next couple slides as well, but it's skills in a spectrum. And we can go back to that last one, Drew.
Yeah.
Um, if your student, or you, if you are a student, has struggles, and most of us do, honestly, with things like turning assignments in late, coming up to deadlines, procrastinating, or maybe even forgetting deadlines, or we show up to school, like let's say, we call mom, hey, I forgot my textbook again. A lot of times executive function deficits show up in overwhelm. So junior year in high school is a lot of my students, where they're at, and it's just a crazy time. So overwhelm is natural, but I think sometimes if that gets out of hand and we're feeling like, oh gosh, I'm falling behind, that could be a sign that we're lacking in executive function. Or maybe your student studies for hours but feels like they're not retaining. And it kind of boils down to, I feel like I know what to do. I hear this a lot, but I'm not doing it. The student isn't quite getting that done. That's not a sign of low motivation or laziness or lack of skill. This is often just a sign that we need to strengthen our EF, our executive functions. And so these are the pillars of executive function are going to be organization, planning, prioritization, and time management. And these are skills that we all have in a spectrum. And as we age and as we grow, we can gain these skills. That's the good news. Even without coaching, we will naturally improve our time management, planning, organizing. up until a certain point in our late 20s, right? And then we are who we are. But especially in like the middle school, high school range, we can get a lot done by helping students think about first where they struggle. So this metacognition, and then from there work on areas, right? Incremental building and building skills, right? So how do we set goals and achieve them? We're figuring out if we're struggling with initiation or maybe the follow through, right? Or somewhere in between. And again, these are skills in a spectrum. Why does it matter a lot in high school? So again, I'm doing a lot of the SAT, ACT, so that's why I kind of start with students. And within those sessions, we're also talking executive function. And what comes up is just how much stuff we've got. So much coursework, maybe like 3, 4, 5 AP classes, different teachers who operate in different ways. SAT, ACT, of course, right? A necessary evil for a lot of people. And then sports or music or theater or other extracurriculars. And then as you kind of get towards spring semester, especially if junior year, you're already thinking about college applications. And so, all of these things are going to create overwhelm in even the most even keeled of us. So executive function coaching can help us manage these and understand that our success isn't just about intelligence. That's true of the SAT, ACT as well. These are not tests of intelligence, they're tests of effort. And putting in time and effort for our EF skills can help us manage the increasing complexity that we're bound to find junior year. So just a lot going on. EF can help. I mentioned that we've all got this in a spectrum. So just because I'm strong with planning doesn't necessarily mean I'm good enough with my time management. I have students who they've got their goals, they've got the deadlines in the calendar, but then they think something's going to take an hour and it ends up taking 3. So for that student, we're really going to have to hone in on, well, why am I predicting this will take less time? What part of it is taking more time? How do we minimize distractions and kind of monitor and just inhibit distraction? Some skills are going to come naturally to some people, and others are going to require a lot more intentional development, really sitting down, thinking about where do I struggle, why do I struggle, and then how do we improve? So we'll talk a bit about planning and the prioritization, which of course comes into play in every aspect of life, but certainly in high school. We've got to figure out where we're starting from. And I'm always, as a tutor or coach, meeting my students where they are. So first session has to be about getting to know them. And sometimes asking questions, if I ask them, it's going to often help the student understand more about themselves. It helps me too. But you don't really think about, well, I know I'm missing deadlines, but where am I actually losing time? I know sometimes I'm working and getting distracted, but what is it actually? Is it just text messages? Is it Snapchat? Is it something else? Is it siblings? Is it a pet? Got to think about, am I a morning person? Do I do my best work in the evening? Um, what kind of study environment? We'll talk about engineering, a good one will be best. What strategies work and what don't, and then really what habits are holding me back. So we always have to do this metacognitive thinking about the way we think to build self-awareness so that we can build our skills from there. And we're always coming at it from this lens of curiosity. So as a coach, not trying to say, okay, we've got these deficits, we must improve. It's where do I feel good? Where do I not feel as good? And how do we work with that? Motivation is very tied in. And to be a good task initiator, a good planner, a good prioritizer, we have to start with clear goals. So whether that's a test score or a grade in a class or certain, like we want straight A's, know your goal and write it down, make it real. And then individually, with your coach, with your parents, you measure progress along the way. Prioritization also involves thinking about what's going to be the toughest, what's most important. So if you've got 2 final exams, but you've got a high B in one and a high A in the other, we're going to focus more on this class and test with the high B to try to boost it to a higher grade. So that might be a greater impact. I'm more risk of dropping down to a B or B minus. And so we think about that, plan ahead, and then we know where we have to focus most of our energy and effort. I'm a big fan of doing things first that are hardest, so prioritizing the toughest things. And most students do benefit from that. Easier said than done. But as we plan, I would keep that in mind, right? So if I've got 5 things coming up this week, ideally, I'm going to schedule some of the hardest stuff first, at least initiating that task so I know what to expect. And before we study, just like before you write an essay, you want to plan, decide what am I studying, right? Being very specific, what class and what unit, estimate how long it'll take. And sometimes we won't be very good at that. And you have to calibrate and realize, oh, shoot, I'm always guessing it's going to take longer than it did or less time than it did. Putting review sessions in your phone calendar. We'll talk about like tools to use and apps, but Google Calendar is a big one. And then just, yeah, planning before you start, right? You want to have a plan of action before you go to the action.
And I will say too, Tal, I'm sure you've experienced this in terms of estimating how long. I always encourage kids to go long on that, to always overestimate as opposed to underestimating. And that way, maybe if they do, if it does take them a little bit less time, they always feel good about that. It also might build in a little bit of an extra break. But
Yeah.
so many times, and Tal can speak to this too, and I'm sure you've experienced this, that students are just like, oh, Drew, I got it totally under control. Like this will totally just take me an hour. If I focus really for just that hour, I'll totally be able to bang that out. And then 2 hours later, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not even halfway done with this. And it's demoralizing to them. And they
Yep.
start, as Tal said, they start losing motivation. They start asking like, what's wrong with me? And it's nothing. It's just that you underestimated how much time that would actually take. So,
Yeah.
for certain students, we had like the double rule, which is whatever time they thought it would take them, I just naturally doubled it. And they're like, Drew, really? I'm like, trust me, we'll just double it. It's no inclination of what I think your skills are. It's more just I want to build in a little bit of a cushion there.
Yeah.
And as you can tell, when we're working with students on this, like we're trying to do it in a joking way, try to have some fun with them, try to bring them out of their shell a little bit. It's not just all like failure, failure, failure. It's like, hey, this is something we're going to work on.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And like we'll talk about how, we'll measure success incrementally, every success we celebrate. But yeah, I think what you say is definitely important. I certainly have seen that a lot. Um, so as we're working through like the initial executive function skills, determining where are we really feeling good, where am I losing points on tests, where am I struggling in school? When we build these little incremental steps for success, so the first thing might just be, hey, this student is really struggling with deadlines. Just literally downloading a calendar app, number one, that's a huge success. That's a win. All right, we're one step closer, right? And I'm gonna, as a coach, I'm gonna celebrate that, right? I'm gonna say, all right, perfect. This is not a little thing. We got this downloaded, it's installed. Next step is let's put some stuff in the calendar, right? We've got paper deadlines coming up. Even just putting those dates into the calendar, that's progress. The next challenge will be actually meeting those deadlines, right? Scheduling review sessions and breaks and work as we move up to it. But we're going to break these large goals into incremental small wins. And then, as Drew mentioned, like a setback is just a setback. And it's much better to say, I'm going to plan for 2 hours and maybe I'll take an hour and a half than plan for an hour and realize, oh, crud, this is taking way longer. So if we suffer a setback, we just think about, well, what went wrong? How can we change it? Did any part of it actually go well? And then let's adjust accordingly. So when needed, we'll make changes. Don't always have to, but at a certain point, there's always going to be a little bit of calibration. And so moving on from prioritizing and planning to time management, something that I think we all have certain struggles with, the biggest thing being procrastination. So when we are planning our time and scheduling things in, that's not just scheduling study time and scheduling work, but it's scheduling time with friends, right? In college, it's scheduling sleep and eating time between tests. The best students don't just work harder and put in effort, they really work with intent. So the metacognition aspect, I've really thought a lot about where I'm at and what's giving me trouble, and that helps me plan on what I'm going to work on. As we talked about, how long things will take, and we'll try to kind of calibrate how long that generally is and adjust if we need to. Putting study sessions in the calendar, we'll talk about how long that should be, right? Sometimes shorter blocks of time is better than longer. And then I would add maybe a fifth bullet: protect study time like any other commitment, but then also protect your free time, right? Super important to have time to be yourself and to be with friends and family and just breathe. But then again, when we have our study time, we have to actually commit. We can't have, distractions all around us. Can't have the game on. Can't have the phone right here. Yeah, intent, and then that'll reduce your stress and make you better at following through for sure. Something that I find, like especially the brightest students I work with, really high achieving, very high motivated, a lot of whom do struggle with executive function skills. Many of them are trying to set aside like 4 hours, like 3 hour blocks of work, and they're just grinding it out. And there are some students who I've worked with who are like, yeah, they really do thrive with that, but it is rare. And even like I went to law school, and I'm now recovering, many years now, recovering lawyer, but same kind of thing where people would work for hours and hours and hours. And I just kind of noticed, well, it's better to break this up. I'll do an hour or two, and then I'm going to take a break, right? Or, if the night before the test, I needed to do some studying. For me, at least, I was better off studying from 10 p.m. to midnight, sleeping for 4 hours, and then waking up in the morning before the test, doing some more. But the Pomodoro technique you may be familiar with, and other executive function studies have shown that shorter blocks of work is better. It will help you retain information. And then taking the breaks, this interleaving between learning things, helps you also just kind of absorb and retain information when you come back. So you don't work and work and work until your concentration is diminished. You work until you feel like, all right, I've gotten a good chunk done. Let me take a short break and then come back. It will help a lot. That rest is not wasting time. That will help your brain replenish its stores and helps you learn.
And it's also important for students to realize that they need that break. Because again, I think that's where students, if they're feeling behind the eight ball a little bit, or they're feeling disorganized, or they're feeling behind, that's what they instinctively kind of fall back on. Is, as Tal mentioned, it's like, oh, Drew, I'm totally fine. Like I can just grind for 3 straight hours.
Yeah.
But just that student having some self-awareness and knowing like they can't actually function that way. So they need to be able to build in those breaks to actually be able to process and, as Tal said, like learn better.
So, yeah, and we got to be smart about breaks too, right? It's not a break to just hop into a well-worn path of distraction where we're
Right.
texting or we're on an app. It maybe is just walking and being outside for a minute, getting a snack, talking with family or friends, right? You want to be deliberate about your breaks and not let it suck you in and totally distract you. Some tools. So I mentioned Google Calendar. This is the big one. Our goal is not in this to remember everything, right? That's true for every class. You're not trying to remember everything. You're trying to build a system that helps you get the main things and stay organized. So, I mean, I'm doing, usually it's clocks and alarms and then Google Calendar. But a lot of coaches like to have the big whiteboard up in your room. So you've got like the big calendar and you can kind of cross stuff up as you go. Some students thrive with that analog version. And even those people probably should have the digital calendar as well, keep it both places. But stopwatches, right? Engineering your environment so that it's organized, but that you have all the tools you need. And there's not one size fits all. You have to think about, what are the things that I don't really resist, right? If I'm really against checklists, then maybe that's not the move for me. Maybe I just need to put stuff in the calendar, right? But the best system is going to be the one that we can use and use consistently. So how do we build a plan? We want to be proactive, not reactive. That can be as simple as looking at the syllabus and knowing what the big deadlines and assignments and test dates are. As you are planning for like finals, you really want to understand like what the tests are going to have and what the format is. But in a week, you're not just planning assignments and deadlines and homework and studying. It's really important to also literally schedule breaks. and literally schedule downtime. If you plan ahead, you're less likely to be like, oh gosh, I've got this last minute decision. Do I focus on math or bio? I've got to do both. I only have time for one. If we plan ahead and have built in both work time and downtime, we're less likely to make those mistakes. And this would be like an example of a college final exam week where you just look at how detailed it is. The tests are in bold, you can see, but then each day there's food, there's rest, right? We're breaking up topics and not just doing 5 hours of studying for history. And we're also being conscious that I've got 2 tests on Monday and one on Tuesday. So we really need to make sure that if we're not focusing on math before Monday, that Monday afternoon is dedicated to a lot of that, right? Afternoon or evening. But you can see on Tuesday after the test, we got to take a nap or we're going to get some coffee or both, right? And then some more studying, right? So this doesn't always have to be stuck to perfectly, but if you plan ahead like this, including downtime, it will serve you really well down the road. Your future self will be thankful.
I will also say too, like sometimes when you introduce this to students, you get a little bit of pushback because they're like, Drew, why does it have to be so detailed? Like literally like every hour.
Yeah.
But once students actually sit down and do it and come up with a plan that's reasonable, it does take a lot of the stress away for them because once we have it, then it's just like, hey, we have it. Now it's just executing the plan. Like in some ways, we've done all the heavy lifting, creating the plan. We have it outlined, and now we know we just got to follow it, and we know the plan's going to be successful if we follow it. And again, back to the point that Tal and I mentioned before, like in this plan, we do want to build in a little bit of a cushion, right? Because the idea is to take the stress away, not add stress. So again, I'll add a little bit of extra time, even if a student's like, I think this will take me an hour. I'm like, well, maybe we'll build in an hour and a half, right? Because that way, if it does in fact take an hour and a half, they're not stressed out that, oh my gosh, I'm behind in my plan already. I've only hit day one. But I have seen, for students to take the time to actually write this out with their input, it does take a lot of stress away from them, knowing that they have this mapped out and all they have to do is then just follow it. And they'll look and be like, all right, it's Tuesday. What do I need to do? And it's like, great, I can do all this.
Yeah, that's important because like that does look like a pretty intimidating calendar at first glance, but
Right.
you're sitting down with your student and again, like meeting them where they are and saying, okay, here's what we're going to plan for. But like you said, the goal is definitely to reduce stress. And once you get in the routine of, let's say, okay, gym is 5 to 6, 7 p.m. every Wednesday and Friday. Once you've done that a couple times, it's going to be in the calendar, but you won't need to like look and check. It's part of your routine. And so then we'll just get more and more into that. Last little bit I'm going to talk about is focus and then self-regulation, something that many of us have trouble with. A lot of it is phone distraction. And I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. But like when I was teaching in the classroom, I know that was a big thing. And even tutoring online, right? It's just hard to know when someone's got distractions around them. We want to design a study environment for success. And so maybe that's just the desk in our room, or if we decide that's not conducive, maybe it's the library, right, or a cafe. And our job really is going to be to reduce our distractions because the stuff that's always going to be there is like I mentioned, phone. Sometimes people are, into video games, might just be social media, various apps, or just like overwhelmed with how many tabs you have open, right? Or notifications that are showing up. There are apps that I think are worth exploring. I also think just reducing clutter and friction is good. Um, I've used Stay Focused. I think it's a really good one. Some of these just limit how much time you have on an app or how much screen time you have. But your job as a student, my job as a coach is to help identify where are my paths of distraction that are really easy to go to. And then how do I make that a little bit more tricky? But most distractions, we know how we get distracted. They're predictable. We just got to make it a bit harder to access. And so that goes to Seth Perler's quote of make what is hard easy and what's easy hard. Might just have to turn your phone off and put it in another room, right? Turning it over next to you might not be enough. If we're using a planner, keep that open so that you're kind of able to reference it. block website or Discord or whatever it is during study time, and then just preparing ahead. So little changes like making sure we're ready for tomorrow, tonight, create lasting habits that can really help you in every aspect of life, not just school. And that's something I think is worth noting is that that is the purpose of EF is to help you just in life. As a coach, I'm not trying to be a guru. Our goal, right, and Drew will attest, is we're trying to meet for 30 minutes, once every week or so, but then expand that, make it 30 minutes once every 2 weeks and 30 minutes once a month. And then all of a sudden the student realizes, oh, I've got this, right? So that's our goal, is to give them efficacy. We need to separate work and play. They are both important, but we need boundaries between them. When it's time to work, we work. When it's time to relax, we don't. Maybe like shutting off Gmail notifications. That was a big thing for me that helped me make my wife less mad at me less often. And when it's time to relax, you just relax totally. You just kind of ignore or inhibit distractions and making sure that you're focused on one thing, not the other. A lot of procrastination. As a coach, you want to try to diagnose why. It is usually not laziness or low motivation. It's I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Sometimes fear of failure is a big thing, right? I just don't feel like I'm good at this. And so I'm going to procrastinate because I don't like it. And then perfectionist tendencies, of course, as well. Usually we just got to build these small first steps. It's not be motivated. You have to have these goals. It's just, okay, let's start by breaking it down, make it more manageable. And then last slide, I'm going to toss it over to Drew. How do we overcome procrastination? Much easier said than done. But the first thing is the metacognition, thinking about how we're thinking. Be conscious about why am I procrastinating and how does it manifest in my school and life. Examine it. Is it really because I am just like, I don't want to do it and there's stuff that's more fun? Or is it because I'm afraid of not doing well? Be aware of your well-worn paths of distraction and how you will counter that. And then negotiate with yourself. If I do, this much on this day, then I'm allowed to have, an hour of video games. And if I don't, then I can't. And then try to prioritize hard things first, reward yourself with the easier things, and then rest and play later.
Yeah, and the hard thing first, you mentioned this, Tom. It is sometimes I'll compromise with students and be like, okay, if we have three assignments, rank them in order. Like their very, very easiest one, sometimes I'll tell them I want you to do that last, but maybe the absolute hardest one, you can work on this other thing for a little bit just to kind of get into it a little bit and get your brain going and kind of overcome that initial procrastination hurdle. But, I mean, it intuitively makes sense. The reason why we want to do the hardest things earlier is just those are the things that are going to require the most mental energy. And I want the student to be as fresh as possible when they're tackling those. Whether if it's, whether they're, and then for their easiest assignment, I know if they procrastinated a little bit or the night pushes a little bit later, that they can still get it done and they're going to be fine. Whereas if for whatever reason the night's going a little bit longer than they were hoping, and suddenly they have this hardest thing that they still have to do, that can be overwhelming for students. Whereas if it's just like, oh, I just have this one quick thing, I know I can bang this out in 15 to 20 minutes, no problem. And the night's gone a little bit later, they're like, okay, the hardest parts are over. I can just sit down, get this last thing done, and I'm all set. So that's kind of the rationale behind that. And when again, back to Tal's kind of metacognition, when you talk about this with students in terms of like, hey, when are you freshest? When are you most likely to be able to tackle this? They do internalize it, and it does kind of make sense for them. But it is that's where figuring out students' learning styles and best in times that they can operate most efficiently is really, really helpful for students to have some self-awareness around that. All right, so I'll start my part by just talking about learning more effectively. And really what it comes down to is we want students to engage with their learning and to do that as actively as they can. So explaining concepts to themselves, if it's a math, like actually working through sample problems, teaching someone else is probably actually the best way that students can demonstrate their understanding. So in the med school model, It's see it, do it, and then teach someone else. Because when you can actually explain it to someone else, and this might be a student, this might be a sibling, this might be a pet, this might be a parent, but when they can actually teach someone else, that's when they know they absolutely have it. And learning happens through that active engagement. And really, what we're trying to do in many ways in stressing this active learning is I'm trying to slow students down because oftentimes students will be like, Drew, I have all these great notes. I'm totally ready for the test. It will just take me 15 minutes and I'll just go through all my notes and I'll be able to process it all and I'll have it and I'll be good to go for the test. And then they do that and then they go into the test and they're like, Drew, I don't get it. Like, well, I didn't do as well as I was hoping I was going to be able to do. And it's like, well, yes, you reviewed your notes, which is great that you took some time to actually go through them, but you weren't actually doing it actively. It was all just passive. It was like, yep, know it, know it, know it, know it, know it, know it. But they didn't actually demonstrate to themselves that they actually mastered it. So that's the idea of active learning, is really just getting kids to slow down a little bit and to engage with the material and to prove to themselves that they actually have a deeper understanding of what is being taught. So one great way of thinking about this is kind of chunk to check in terms of how our brains process material and how we kind of learn best. And again, we've mentioned it a couple times, but this is the trap that students fall into is that they forget kind of the chew part, that it actually takes some time for the brain to process. They need to step away from whatever it is they're learning a little bit in order for their brain to truly kind of internalize what they've been studying. And then again, that checking, making sure that they can actually demonstrate understanding before they move on. And it's you can see it here, but it's not just reading, right? It is actively engaging. It's working through problem sets. It's rewriting notes can be a great way for students to kind of slow themselves down. It's asking themselves questions or forming with a study partner, quizzing one another, and again, parent role, depending on how willing your student is willing to do this with you, can also be a great way. But again, even just having students do this themselves it can also sort of mimic all of those steps as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be with you, or it doesn't necessarily have to be with a study partner. And this is a key one. It's the study smarter, not longer, because sometimes students weigh or consider how much time they put into something with success. And again, Tal mentioned this is like, I spent 3 hours on this, right? How come I didn't achieve my goal on it? And it's not necessarily the length of time, but it's how they approach that time and what they did during that time. So again, reviewing practice questions can be a great way, especially on math or chemistry, any class that involves a problem set, making students go back and redo those problems, right? Whether it's from homework, whether it's from a study guide, again, making sure that it's active, forming their own studying guides. Like anytime I'm doing an academic or an EF program, I introduce this concept to students that it's not just reviewing your notes, but it's actually processing like what is the most important information that I need to glean from this and writing those types of summaries. It's also really helpful in terms of reviewing. If students have a chapter test in AP US history and it's on 2 chapters, like that is a lot of material that they need to cover. But if they've condensed it into a page or two on that study guide, they can just quickly kind of review that and at a glance kind of have an understanding of like, okay, what do I remember? What did I forget? What do I need to go back and do? Similarly with concept maps, same idea, color coding. Again, I have students do this, especially with their study guides. I encourage students to make these study guides as detailed as possible, but just different highlighters. What do I feel like I have full mastery of? What do I kind of know, but maybe I'm a little rough on? And then what do I definitely need to go back and review? And also, that retrieval practice, it's all well and good if students have that in front of them to be like, oh yeah, I totally remember of this, but they only know they got it when they can put the study sheet away or the solution to the math problem away and actually come up with that study guide on their own. without looking, or rework those problems without actually looking at having the solutions in front of them. And again, the real key in terms of what I'm trying to do with these strategies is I'm trying to just slow that student down a little bit, because, students are just like, Drew, I totally got this. And they can literally review 2 or 3 chapters of AP US history in 20 minutes. But it's like, no, you're not actually engaging with it. You're just at a very, very surface level being like, oh, yeah, I remember what's on this test. The other thing in terms of just, as when students, as Tal mentioned, it's a lot that they're juggling, right? It's a number of different classes, it's different teachers, it's different styles. I think our tendency is to kind of think of this with kind of more block practice, which is, all right, if I have a test and it's on 3 chapters, I'm going to devote all my time to the first chapter and be like, yep, I got that down. And now that I've mastered this, I'm going to go on to the second chapter. That's great. And now that I've mastered the second chapter, I'm going to move on to the third chapter. And then maybe the night before, I do a quick review of everything and I'm good to go. But studies have actually shown that a more effective way of studying and reviewing is to actually tackle them all in kind of, think of it as like grouping it or mixed practice, where we look at chapter 1, we look at chapter 2, we look at chapter 3. And that's one study session. And then next study session, go back, review some of the things we may have not have mastered for A, B, and C, and then similarly on that third study session as well. And studies have shown this, that in terms of like immediate practice, like yes, if you've just focused on chapter 1 and then you review chapter 1 questions or problems, like yeah, you're going to do a little bit better having spent all your time on chapter 1 than down here where you did chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. But in terms of performance on the test and retention, you're actually going to retain more if you've been working on these topics throughout. And that's why for test prep programs and things, like we're always working on verbal and working on math. We're always, going back and reviewing things that we've covered throughout the length of that program, just to keep it top of mind when they actually go in to test. So reviewing notes for finals, again, it can't just be a quick glance and a quick reread of all the notes. You want to do it in a more engaging way. So like, what is the topic? What do I know about this topic? And I always encourage students to write it down. And as they're writing things down, I also encourage students to say it out loud. So that way they're hearing it, they're seeing it because it's in front of them. And then if they're actually, writing it, handwriting it, which I encourage students to do, you get the kinesthetic movement of it too, which also helps in terms of getting things into long-term memory. But that's the other idea of this. And it is, in addition to kind of slowing them down, making sure they take the time to process it, it also does help move things from short-term memory into long-term memory. And that's when students have a deep understanding of something and can actually like teach it to someone or can re-explain it to themselves. That's when we know they have it, but also that's when we know that they've moved it into long-term memory as well. So like just questions to ask themselves as they're reviewing, like, what is it that I'm learning? Like, what are the important aspects of it or the important people? Timeline, especially if it's like a history class, like when did this happen? What's the context around it? Where did it happen? Why is this important? And then how did it affect other things? And then, as mentioned here, always encouraging kids to write everything down, right? Because that's when we know they have it, when they can write it down. And also it gives them a study guide and a really nice review sheet that they can go back to, immediately kind of before a test. All right, understanding the test or the exam before students begin their studying, it is an important skill that we encourage students to kind of grow and be comfortable with. Asking your teacher, hey, can you give me a sense in terms of important topics that are going to be on the test or the format of the test? Is it going to be multiple choice? Is it going to be free response? If it's a math test, how many problems are there going to be on the test? Can you give me a sense for it? Just to help them with their study game plan, just so they also go in feeling confident. And it's not cheating in any way, shape, or form. We're not trying to game this in any way, shape, or form. We're not trying to give a student an unfair advantage. It's really just so they can go into that test or that exam as prepared as possible. So again, I already mentioned this, but just encouraging students, we'll talk about this in a minute, to be their own best self-advocates, right? Asking teachers, hey, are there certain topics you think that might be more important than other topics that I should spend more of my time on, or really making sure that I understand deeply? Checking with other classmates who or upperclassmen who have already taken that class in terms of kind of, what do these evaluations look like? Again, not in a cheating way. Our students aren't going to the upperclassmen and being like, hey, do you have a copy of the test from last year? But it's more just like, generally speaking, like, hey, can you give me some advice in terms of how you studied for it, how you prepared for it, what worked well for you? And then this is key, like, especially at the college level, but even at the high school level, if if a teacher is offering a review session, or even during students in high school, if they have a study hall or a free period, again, some self-advocacy there to kind of meet with the teacher ahead of time and be like, hey, can I do some review with you? Again, it also from a study perspective, like no student wants to go into a session like that completely cold and be like, in all honesty, I haven't thought about this. I don't even know what's on the test. So it's, back to Tal's point of motivation. It can be a great motivator for students in terms of making that study plan a little bit earlier to be like, hey, reach out to your teacher. Let's see if you can do maybe after school or during a free period. If the test is on Friday, let's schedule that for Monday or Tuesday, just so we know we're going to get a jump on studying for that test. And also just knowing the format of it, getting a sense in terms of, can they go, if it's a multiple choice part and then an essay part, can they go back and change anything on the multiple part choice part once they've started the essay? How is it going to be scored? Is there going to be partial credit? Again, encouraging students to write things down, not only for their studying, but also when they're taking tests. Just getting a sense, as Tal mentioned, in terms of prioritizing, how much does this actually count to their overall grade? Again, we want students to prepare. We want students to do well. We want them to be able to show off a little bit, get a little bit more comfortable with their test taking. But if it really is just a short quiz, that's going to count like out of a total of 1,000 points that are going to be accumulated over the course of the semester or over the term. If this quiz is a 5 question quiz and it's each worth 1 point and it's 5 points, like I don't want students spending hours and hours and hours and hours studying for that, because chances are there's other things that are going to be more important than that quiz. And in terms of actually, again, creating that study plan, that first review, again, reviewing your study guide to identify knowledge gaps, reviewing textbooks, just getting a sense of kind of what you've mastered, what you're still a little bit shaky on, and topics that you're like, oh my gosh, I've totally forgotten all of this. Like, I don't even remember any of this. And this is key. Again, back to that, giving students time to chew. Don't try to relearn everything in one sitting. It's not going to go well. Students do need time to process. They need time to think. They need time to go back and have time to review, and to do this review in as active a way as they can. And then that second review, I'm thinking this is more kind of the night before a little bit. Skip topics you already know well. Prioritize concepts identified in your study guide or current unit. Again, just those areas that you identified as being weaknesses. Now it's your chance to go back and be like, okay, did I actually master this? Review your notes again, return to the textbook to strengthen any remaining weak areas. Again, trying to do that in an active way, not just, yeah, I got it, got it, got it, got it, got it, got it. And then in the study guide, so for instance, in math, like what I encourage students to do, again, be as detailed as they can. What is the math concept? What's the formula? Make sure they can state it in their own words in terms of what they're doing, and then kind of like one or two sample problems that highlight use of that, formula or use of that concept. And then when they're reviewing at a glance, they can be like, yep, I do have this. Maybe try one of those two problems on their own, just again to do it actively and make sure that they have demonstrated that that they've actually mastered it. Again, I'm a big advocate of writing things down. So it helps move things into long-term memory. It helps students process. It helps to slow students down a little bit. Again, so they're not just reviewing, 15 pages of notes in 10 minutes, but actually forcing them to summarize, forcing them to engage with that material. Students can there are students who work better with a partner. It helps them stay on track. It helps them actually be less distracted. Um, but every student's different on this. I've had students who they're actually much better just doing it themselves and talking to themselves. But again, I want to make sure that it's interactive and not just got it, got it, got it, got it, got it. And then you've heard us mention this before, but one of the strongest EF skills that I want students to come out of when I've worked with them is this idea of self-advocacy. And that asking for help is not a sign of weakness in any way, shape, or form. It's not, it's if you're asking for help, you're not admitting like, oh my gosh, like failure, failure, failure. It's just recognizing that we're all people. We all struggle with this. There's no way that anyone's going to be, back to Tal's, kind of time management, prioritization, initiative. Like there is no way that any person on a scale of 1 to 10 is going to be a 10 in all of those areas. And I think this is where working with students with EF and coaching them on EF, like the first hurdle we're trying to get over sometimes is just like that feeling of failure, that idea of shame. Like everyone else seems to be handling this just fine, which is totally not true. They're probably just doing a better job of hiding it. Why am I struggling with this so much? And I will say, when I just do like more straight academic programs, even with our academic programs, I always morph into EF in some way, shape, or form. But it's like there's just not that sort of sense of shame around it. It's like, Drew, I have no idea. Like we've moved into, quadratic equations and I just didn't get it at all. Like, love to just sit down and we can work through it a little bit. And they're like, oh, that's super helpful. Like I now understand quadratic equations a little bit. But if students are struggling with EF, they're struggling with an organization, they're struggling with time management, as a joke, like, sometimes the first thing I'll do just to try to lighten the tone is like, just go get your backpack. Like, let's just see. Like, let's organize your backpack, And just trying to get them over that hurdle a little bit to be like, this isn't any kind of failure or anything. It's not kind of any inherent deficiency that is wrong with you. It's just like any skill. It needs a little bit of practice. We need a plan for it. You need a chance just to, be able to, work with the coach on it, work with it, try it on your own, see what works for you. And it's just like learning the quadratic equation. Like there's nothing else around that. So just getting students to recognize when they need help, identifying who to ask for help. And again, it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help, and know when and how to ask effectively. Like one of my favorite parts of the EF program, is at some point we're going to need to email the teacher and be like, yep, I totally fell down on this and did not write down exactly what, when this paper was due, or I misplaced my notes for it. So just encouraging students to get over that hump and be like, here is how you write a professional email where you just ask for a little bit of help, and what that kind of looks like. And then when students, write that email and they get a very helpful response back from their teacher that's like, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. Here's what we covered, or here's the worksheet again, or here's the link that I wanted you to look at. And again, there's no judgment there. It's just like, hey, you needed some help. You reached out, you got some help, and now we move on.
Yeah, and actually, just real quick, Drew, to follow up, I just want to say,
Yeah.
like, as I was a teacher in school for a while, and as a teacher, when a student came to me and just asked for help or guidance, I don't think every teacher feels this way, but I certainly was. I loved it, and I'd say, "Oh, this
Oh,
person,
yeah.
this student is motivated, and they actually care." And so people are, like you said, so uncomfortable just even societally asking for help. Just knowing that it's a safe place to make mistakes in session and then giving them those tools is so important. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. And again, attending office hours, I love the email your teacher. Like there's,
Mhm.
as Tal mentioned, there's just such a hesitancy to kind of like reach out, but it can often be a student's best move. Like, as Tal mentioned, like teachers just so appreciate it to be like, oh, well, you took the time. Finding a study partner or a small group, this can be great in terms of getting over procrastination for students and getting them engaged and making sure their learning is more active, but it can be a distraction. So it's something I always talk about with my EF students in terms of whether this is going to elevate them or if it's just going to be too distracting for them. Seeking out tutoring, sometimes it could be reaching out to, us. Sometimes it can be a peer mentoring or peer tutoring, can also be helpful. And then again, I'm a huge advocate of creating study guides, like just being able to summarize, being able to put it in your own words, being able to give examples that you've come up with. It's just a great way to reinforce that learning and making sure that it is active. So in terms of test day strategies, again, making sure that students aren't going into these tests cold. They know the format of it. They know what they need to bring the night before. They've laid everything out. There's nothing more, I'd say, stressful than going into a math test, knowing you can use a calculator and realizing that your calculator is at home on your desk. It's not a great mindset in terms of going into that test. And then certainly making sure students go into tests rested, that they go in, having eaten something and aren't starving. And then this is something I always share with my students, whether they're going in for an SAT or an ACT or an exam or an AP exam, or even, just a test that they're slightly nervous about. It's the night before the night before. So everyone always thinks like, oh, I need a good night's sleep the night before, which is helpful, but really you want to make sure you get a good night's sleep the night before the night before. And the reason for that is just especially going into an SAT or an ACT, it's natural for students to be nervous, especially if it's the first time they're taking it. Their sleep might not be 100% fantastic kind of the night before just because they're a little bit nervous. But if they've gotten a good night's sleep the night before, they can kind of bank on that and they're still going into that test rested. So often you'll hear get a good night's sleep the night before, but really the key one is get a good night's sleep the night before, and then think of it as bonus. If you can get a good night's sleep in addition the night before, that's great. And again, just it's not the night before when you're doing the preparation, right? That's the final review. That's when you're just running through things one final time, feeling good about it, knowing that you're going in confident. And I will say too, as part of EF, there is some mindfulness component to it as well. If a student's going into a big test, I always have them do the night before, do a mindfulness exercise of just visualizing it. So visualizing them walking into that classroom, sitting down, they're feeling confident, they're working through the first part of the test and they've absolutely crushed it. And then they go to the second part of the test and they're still feeling great and they crush that too. And then they go to that final essay and they see themselves writing that essay and they have all these great things and great examples. And it's really just trying to make sure that they go in with that proper mindset. And it does help too, because the unconscious doesn't know the difference between necessarily what you've actually experienced and what you've actually just walked yourself through. It's that famous study where, and I know we're short on time, but I love this. It's that famous study where they had basketball players practice free throws. And one of the groups actually shot the free throws. Another group did nothing. And another group just visualized themselves. They didn't actually touch basketball. They didn't actually shoot the free throws, but they, in detail, visualized themselves shooting the free throws. And the group that just visualized it showed as much improvement as the group that actually shot the free throws. So that's what I'm trying to do with that sort of with that mindfulness exercise that night before. Um, so again, in terms of proactively studying, because again, Tal mentioned this. This is all about encouraging our students to be proactive, not reactive. They're in charge of their learning. They can map out plans, and they can study actively, and they can really put themselves in that best position to succeed. But again, there's going to be setbacks, which is totally fine and understandable, right? There's going to be adjustments that need to be made, and that's all kind of built into that process. And I love, this one to ensure that students give themselves grace, right? Again, it's not failure, failure, failure. It's just, hey, here's something that we can work on. Here's some areas that you've identified that you feel a little bit weaker on. It's like any other skill. We're just going to practice it. We're going to try some strategies. We're going to evaluate those strategies. We'll hopefully, again, improve the student's self-awareness a little bit in terms of how do they learn best, when do they feel like they are most kind of in their element, and we're just going to build on that. It takes some time. It doesn't happen overnight, as Tal mentioned. Really, what the goal is to try to get our EF students to be as self-sufficient as they can. And our programs are always customized for that student because everyone is in a different place along this journey, and everyone's going to need kind of different things along that journey. So that's why we always customize our EF programs. It's not just kind of one size fits all there.
And just along those lines, that's why I think celebrating each little win is so big as a coach,
Yeah,
and making sure like, oh yeah, I'm actually am improving even when I feel like it's going slowly.
yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. All right. So we definitely have a couple minutes for questions here. Let me just check. And then as we're moving into questions, if you want to take a minute just to fill out our final poll here, obviously you can reach out to us at any time. As we mentioned, we do SAT, we do ACT, we do SSAT and ISE for the younger students. We do AP and academic tutoring in addition to executive function coaching. We offer free practice tests also, so definitely feel free to reach out to us for those. But if you would like one of our program directors to reach out to you directly, definitely feel free to fill this out. Obviously, you can contact us at any point as well. But we'll just leave that poll up. And again, if you want us to contact you, we'll make sure that our program directors know that you want to be contacted, and they will follow up with you. And again, we do have a couple minutes for questions, so definitely don't hold back. But Tal, this is an interesting one. We kind of mentioned it at the end in terms of making sure students give themselves grace,
Yeah.
that they go into this coaching session with kind of that, we're here to help. It's not here to judge. But kind of early on when you're working with students, how do you kind of break that barrier? Because I know students can get defensive about it. It's like, oh no, I don't even know why you're here. My
Mm-hmm.
executive functioning skills are great, even though they know that they're struggling.
Yeah.
They know that it's certainly an area that they can improve upon. But Tal, can you speak to kind of how you kind of get students to just kind of take a breath a little bit, give themselves some grace, and
Totally.
kind of try to shift their mindset a little bit into a more productive, maybe
Yeah, I think I mean
state of mind?
it's hard, and that's the art to it, but it's human connection really. It
Right.
is making them feel comfortable. This is if you have a problem, it's not really a problem, it is a challenge. And from the get-go, I'm going to talk to them about coming at it from this lens of curiosity. We're just asking
Right.
questions, we're trying to figure out how and why and what we're doing, and then slowly build from it. But I'll also just, like I think I mentioned it, but really emphasize this session space is a safe place for you to make mistakes. It will happen, and that is not a bad thing. And honestly, on a test, when we make a mistake or in life, we'll learn a lot more from that than when it goes well. And so just kind of putting them at ease that they're not the only person going through this, they're one of many, and that our goal is just to build tools to deal with that.
Perfect. And then Tal, just kind of a follow up to that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the journey in terms of buy-in? I know that I see and again, in terms of celebrating the small wins, some of my most reluctant students actually at the start became my most gung-ho students, throughout
Right.
an EF sort of coaching program. But can you kind of talk about what that journey looks like a little bit?
Sure. I think the main hurdle when it is tough at first is often because the student doesn't feel like they need to be there, like you said, or doesn't know why. And so maybe it's not their why, it's the parents' why, right? And they're saying, you have to do this coaching. So in session, in our first meeting, and just as we introduce, want to try to figure out what is our why, what is the student's real motivation. And sometimes it's just, I want to make my parents happy. That's not the best, but that is a motivation. And then other times we discover, well, actually, I just really love to succeed and I like that feeling, right? Or maybe I want to get into this program or this get an athletic scholarship. And once you find that why, that internal motivation, I think a lot of it snowballs from there, and the student then will tend to buy in more. So yeah, just coming at it from this place of not pressure, but understanding, curiosity, and learning, and it tends to usually work. And just make them know I'm not trying to be the guru. I'm trying to help you build your skills that will help you not just in school but in life. And I think that resonates generally.
Yeah, no, and I'd also say like I definitely think framing it as a partnership can be helpful, and it's like, hey, we're just, we're gonna try some things. They may or may not work, we'll adjust. And that it's and that it is gonna be incremental.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, to celebrate those small wins. Because as students start realizing like, oh, I'm procrastinating less, or my organization skills are improving, or I'm feeling better about kind of where I am in terms of academically and juggling all of this. Like that's really where you can really start getting buy-in to is as students, they start implementing some of these, they start realizing they have success with it, they internalize it a little bit more. Those wins, start to stack on top of each other. Let's see. Tal, I think that's all the questions that I see here. But Tal, any closing thoughts here as we end this evening?
No, I'd say just feel free to, like you said, to reach out. Don't feel any pressure in joining. If you just want to ask some questions about how it works and find a little bit more info, we can do that. I'm always happy to touch base with people. And yeah, just our goal is to help you and your students feel like they're getting the most out of their both academic career, but then also using these skills in life.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. I think we will end it on that. All right. But thanks everybody for joining this evening. We so appreciate your taking the time, and I hope this was helpful for all of you. All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, Tal. Always good seeing you.
Likewise, thanks, Drew.
All right. Thanks, everybody.